Welcome to my video exposing the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. According to mainstream media, this act became needful because anti-Semitic harassment has increased on American college campuses. I wonder what organization provided the data. Hopefully it wasn't a foxy or shady one that would stoop to exaggeration, hypocrisy, and deception. But perhaps this act has little to do with college campuses and more to do with suspect circumspection. Let's explore this together, and along the way I will share my reasons why I'm anti the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. Reason number one, the title itself. Jews aren't the only Semites, not even close. The Palestinians that Israel harasses, robs, terrorizes, dispossesses, and murders daily with American tax dollars, they're Semitic too. In fact, there are 500 million Semitic peoples in Northern Africa, the Horn of Africa, and the Middle East, 95% of whom aren't Jews. So the next time someone complains to you that he doesn't like the IDF shooting unarmed Palestinian children, that he doesn't like the Israeli army bombing hospitals, schools, and infrastructure, that he loathes Israel's joke justice system giving little to no jail time for extremist settlers burning Palestinians alive, don't respond with the usual Pavlovian slogan, "That's anti-Semitic." Show how sophisticated you are by responding to such complaints with, "That's anti-Jewish." So why isn't this bill called the Anti-Jewish Awareness Act? Jews are the only people with whom it ultimately concerns itself. Why not just say so from title to text? I tend to think the US Congress more compromised than stupid. Let's research the ringleader of the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, Representative Peter Roskam, see if we can figure why he feels the need to take such action.
We didn't really know what to do, so we came up with going on a trip. Should we go to Europe? We don't want to go to Europe. You want to go to the Caribbean? I don't want to go to the Caribbean. Let's go to Israel. So we made a decision as a family, and Elizabeth and I took our 4 kids and we spent a week together in Israel. And I'll tell you what, it's more fun going winning than losing, but it made such an incredibly powerful impression on our 4 kids that just based on that trip and that trip alone, our 4 kids now consider themselves to be friends of Israel.
And you can see another rocket going in from Israel, slowly making its way, presumably a precision-guided missile coming into the northern part of the Gaza Strip, and it seems as though the bombardment has been very much in Beit Lahia. Now the sound that you are hearing here, we're on the top of the hill, and I think you can probably see there are lots of Israelis gathered around who are cheering when they see these kinds of Israeli strikes.
Israel is our best friend in the nation. We've had incredible military cooperation. We have had incredible intelligence cooperation.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
No surprise to find AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. In case you don't know who they aren't American, but they are one of the most powerful lobbies in America, one that Bobby Kennedy ordered to register as a foreign agent, a group that almost every elected or hopeful politician will grovel or value before to achieve or keep federal office. AIPAC are obsessed with one kind of Semite. It ain't Palestinians. Representative Roskam supports Israeli land grabs in Palestine. He's recently drafted provisions to protect that crime from international boycott. In fact, AIPAC helped him with the wording. They're persistently helpful about ensuring the most important state among America's 51 states continually receives peerless treatment. They've even been kind enough to deliver finalized bills for it to the US Congress. I must say I find myself entertaining a certain admiration for the de facto honesty that's arising for America here. It's claimed since 1967 that it's against internationally illegal Israeli settlements in Palestinian territory. all the while showing its unwillingness to stop master-planned racial communities from conquering Palestinian property. Roskam and his fellow AIPAC lackeys apparently convened and decided that America should just officially codify what it's been pretending to protest in public for decades. Kudos on the integrity quest. Bollocks on the timing though. It stinks like Father Abraham's gym socks, because meanwhile, Pete Roskam has also felt impelled to draft the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which he claims was inspired by a letter about harassment against Jews, Muslims, and Sikhs on campuses, but Sikhs and Muslims don't occupy this bill's moniker or implications. While the arguing's still good-ish in America, college kids who mistake Palestinians for people and therefore criticize Israel accordingly are going to argue further with Zionist Jews on campus, not Sikhs and Muslims, after they discovered that the 50 states have yet again favored Israelis in their criminality against Palestinians. AIPAC's prostitutes, the Department of State, and bogus alternative media often conflate criticisms of Israel with hatred for Jewry. I imagine Peter knows that full well and doesn't offer his 2-4 legislation special coincidentally. Check the chutzpah from those who speak as if Israel and Jews are one and the same, as if individuals aren't allowed to decide for themselves about Israel. That aforementioned letter, which supposedly inspired Rep. Roskam to legislate about anti-barbaric Zionism awareness, didn't provide him guidance on, and I quote, current manifestations of anti-Semitism, including discriminatory anti-Semitic conduct that is couched as anti-Israel or anti-Zionist. Nor did that letter apparently say anything about Jews from the West engaging in anti-Semitic conduct by brutalizing Palestinian Semites. But Roskam does mention his legislation is informed by the definition of anti-Semitism set forth by the Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism of the Department of State in the fact sheet issued on June 8, 2010. What a Machiavellian mouthful. I've read that definition and it says nothing about 98% of the world's Semitic peoples. Since 1948, Israel has killed 86,000 Arabs directly. It's demolished 40,000 Palestinian homes. It's turned 4 million Palestinians into refugees. After those millions of violent acts of anti-Semitism, Roskam and his Anti-Semitism Awareness Act colleagues concern themselves with Jews, with protecting Israeli land grabs against Palestine's rightful residents. This isn't surprising. It's not Palestinians about whom end-times Christian Zionists obsess themselves. It's not Palestinian Christians or Muslims who pay half the Democrats' political bills and 1/4 the Republicans' political bills. It's not Palestinians who have dozens of powerful lobbies and billions of dollars at their disposal to bribe Congress into ignoring the cries that emanate from the escalating body pile of Israel's victims, stacking itself skyward like a blood-soaked Tower of Babel. The Anti-Semitism Awareness Act has a glaring oversight with regard to Jews who criticize Israel. Not one word about that brand of so-called self-hating Jew, but maybe Pete and his K Street company think that problem will resolve itself given current unreality includes people invoking the usually idiotic anti-Semitic charge against Israel's Jewish detractors. I myself watched a reporter do that with Rabbi Dovid Weiss. The disingenuously entitled Anti-Semitism Awareness Act also sets off industrial-strength alarm bells when it states that nothing in it should be construed to diminish the First Amendment. Why do I feel as confident about that as I did when I heard W say he'd protect America's freedoms post 9/11? This act has nothing to do with protecting Jewish Americans in college. It's about protecting Israel from criticism. It's about covering for its puppets that possess neither the balls nor the ovaries to curtail Israeli criminality. Doing that would actually reduce the flack about Israel, which might otherwise find its way to Jewish students, and it would help reduce the risks of violence toward Palestinians and Israelis in Palestine. Bonus for Ted Cruz, just because AIPAC makes you suck at geography and empathy.
Palestine has not existed since 1948.
It doesn't mean that Palestine disappeared. Cruz smirks as powerless Palestinians suffer and perish in the dollar-denominated distance. As Cruz, Roscom et al. Do the bidding of the Zionist Jewish establishment in America, they will further place everyday Jews in harm's way. Gentiles who aren't bamboozled by the likes of Sean Insanity and Shill O'Reilly understandably see such indefensible activities, like legislation favoring Israelis stealing land, like legislation slickening the slippery slope to free speech's disappearance, as favoring Israel over ethics, as elevating Jews above others. But it's not powerful Jewish elitists who usually endure the backlashes that they themselves create. If fellow Jews have to bleed or die for their agendas, that doesn't matter to them. The puppet dog and master pony show must go on. But that doesn't mean it must succeed. Tyranny often insinuates itself into societies through stealthy incrementalism. So don't keep quiet until it's illegal to criticize or boycott Israel everywhere in America. If you think I'm making an American mountain out of an Israeli molehill, consider that in South Carolina it's illegal to criticize Israel in public schools. Half the states in America have already passed legislation against boycotting Israel.
And can you feel the
Such legislation in Texas adversely affected disaster relief because some Texans who needed assistance first had to sign a contract that they don't or won't boycott Israel. I'll never forget when I first watched tragic footage from the Katrina disaster. My first thought was, those folks better not boycott Israel or they're not getting one damned dime from me. Perhaps scariest among examples showing creeping tyranny would be Benjamin Netanyahu, a known liar and warmonger about Iraq, helped instigate an unpunished war of aggression and unpunished war crimes there. He walks freely in the fawning West, suffering no tribunal reprisals for his role as 1 million Iraqi bodies smolder in the distance as millions more Iraqis have lost their homes and their country. A decade later, BB gun lies and warmongers about Iran before a spineless U.S. Congress that gives him a standing ovation every half sentence that legally and ethically should cut all aid to Israel because it isn't non-proliferation alum and hasn't allowed its hundreds of nukes to be inspected because it's been massacring Palestine and Palestine's neighbors since 1948. And because it committed the Lavon Affair, USS Liberty, and 9/11 false flag attacks against the United States. Pipe up publicly about such things, though, and you risk your neck.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech was warmly received by Democrats and Republicans in Congress. According to ABC News, Netanyahu received 29 standing ovations during his address, 4 more than President Obama received during his State of the Union earlier this year. However, there was at least one dissenting voice inside the halls of Congress Tuesday.
Yet, as we share their hopes,
That was Ray Avalea, a Jewish-American activist with the group Code Pink. She was disrupting Netanyahu's speech, standing in the congressional gallery. She was yelling, "No more occupation, stop Israel, war crimes, equal rights for Palestinians, occupation's indefensible." As she was screaming, members in the audience tackled her to the ground. Undercover security forces dragged her outside. She was taken to George Washington University Hospital, where she's treated for neck and shoulder injuries.
Name another nation that gets away with half what Israel does in America and against it. One other nation that speaks half the lies or commits half the crimes that Israel does, yet gets billions annually and openly occupies the U.S. Congress. And you wonder why people talk about the Israel lobby or about Jewish power. Whatever you do, applaud the emperor as he publicly struts in his birthday suit. Ignore the evidence presented in this video and in the description below. And don't forget to cry, "That's un-American. That's just conspiracy theory." Or, "That's anti-Semitic." Nuremberg Netanyahu doesn't fool me, neither does Representative Peter Roskam as he bucks atop the Trojan horse that AIPAC sent him in on, neither does any other politician from that Prostitution Action Committee. I know why Pete pens his land grab and so-called anti-Semitism legislation because I know who provides his power and his funding. It isn't the Jews who are still working on their college degrees. I know whom Roskam represents. It isn't the Americans who understand that the blood of 1776 wasn't spilled to substitute subservience to England for subservience to Israel. As politicians implicitly declare that sizable campaign contributions from foreign lobbies aren't negotiable, we will keep explicitly declaring the same thing about Palestinian lives and America's freedoms.